2, 1. Hi, I'm Elise, and welcome to this tech debate where the main conversation will surround the subject: will Huawei die from ceaseless sanctions and the mistrust from the public? What an incredible lineup that we have today. Now, gentlemen, there is just one rule in my virtual room today, and that is stick to the time you're given when you have your turn to speak. I will ask you 3 questions and give you all a chance to share your thoughts. You all get 2 minutes each turn. So let's begin, shall we? With external sanctions, challenges, transaction bans from particular countries taking place, can Huawei reassure customers confidence on Huawei's business stability and continuity? I would like to start with the affirmative side, please.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Elise. And I'd like to first start about a topic that all of us have heard a lot of recently, and that, of course, is the new Cold War that is emerging. Now, I believe that this new Cold War is much more than just an economical trade war. We can actually see that, there's a lot of conflicts of ideology, of diplomacy, even different cultures between the United States and China is really at the forefront of this big new Cold War that is emerging. Now, I want to talk specifically about the semiconductor industry, and I'm looking at some recent comments from the Semiconductor Industry Association, which, by the way, represents 95% of the United States semiconductor companies. Their CEO recently came out and said that sanctions against Huawei, or against Chinese companies would actually have a ripple-down effect throughout the entire industry, affecting many companies and countries involved in this process. However, there's one key point here is that Huawei is the major stakeholder. So by far, they have the most to lose here, and they are the most exposed, to these sanctions. Now look at last month, Chinese chip giant SMIC, they were just informed by the Pentagon that their company will be blacklisted as another security threat. I think what we're seeing right now is that the United States is seizing every opportunity they can to suppress China. I would say that these, tactics, these sanctions against Huawei is, really going to be cutting off a tremendous amount of critical supplies to the company. And this would be equivalent to cutting off someone's critical supply of oxygen. So my question to the panel is this: how is Huawei not going to suffocate?
Then let's see what the opposite side thinks.
So recently I read this book, John Bolton's book about, the room where it happened. It was the former National Security Advisor of the United States. From the whole book, I understand that United States and Russia have a mutual understanding silently against China. So they are not an enemy actually in each other. But when it comes to China, the subject is China, well, they're all in, which means everything they do actually is against China. So in Turkey and in the region, we are interpreting the subject like that. So whenever the American administration says something against Huawei, we say that we have to do the opposite way. So I apologize for the American press who just listen this, but for example, Secretary Pompeo, recently he was in Athens. He made a statement against Huawei and Turkey. And he just threatened us by saying that don't do, joint projects with Huawei. When we heard something as a Turks, we see that no, we will do the opposite way, because whatever this American administration says is wrong. But we have a perception like that. So in many regions, I don't think that Huawei will suffocate, but I don't know any other region. But in this region, Huawei's business are going good, so the Turkish market is okay with Huawei, and nobody has a problem with Huawei. We don't have any question marks in the head. So that's why I would like to say that this Cyrus's point about the Cold War against China is right. Actually, there is a war, there's a Cold War of technology or whatever, and not surprisingly, Russia and United States get together against China, which is actually an unbelievable record for me in the history.
Thank you, Mr. Alkin, for those points. But let's take it back to the affirmative side, because I would like to see if we have a different opinion now. Is it the US or is it Europe? What do we think from the affirmative side?
Well, what the Europe does, what Turkey does, doesn't matter. The game is the United States and China. If you look at the largest countries, it's first China, then India, then United States, and you drop way down before you even get to Russia. So, you know, that's where the game's being played. And to think that maybe the change isn't going to happen is ridiculous. There's no reason to give confidence that Huawei's going to be okay. They're not okay. None of us are okay. There's a virus out there killing us off. The world has changed. The economy has changed. That's irreparable and will keep on going on forever. So the one thing we can count on is change. And hopefully with the emerging technologies we have and the decades-long move towards more globalization. In fact, I'd say it's centuries long. There's never been a time when people didn't want to trade more. The governments are mucking things up. They're making a mess of it. They're slowing us down. And our only hope is cooperation wherever we can, even with Turkey. There's tremendous pressure right now to not do business with each other. And it's, you know, it really matters. We've got to do whatever we can to try to straighten this out. But it's not going to mean we're not going to change. Let's get used to the idea that change is inevitable. Markets will be screwed up, more volatile than ever, and we can count on a complete revolution in everything that we have right now happening within the next 10 years. And I happen to think it's going to be towards abundance for all. But, you know, let's not get hung up on whether or not there's a mess. Let's start trying to solve it.
That was a strong counter from Mr. Whitlock. Then let's close this round with the opposite side.
Well, I think that what Cyrus said about the US government looking to suffocate Huawei is absolutely correct. Some of the other descriptions I've heard is a decapitation of Huawei as well. But here's why I think Huawei has a chance. So first of all, Huawei is a technology leader, of course. What people may not know is almost half of Huawei's employees are engaged in R&D, and more than 10% of profits every year are reinvested in research and development. So what this means is that Huawei is able to deliver technology advances to its customers. And of course, this is very important. But even more important than this, though, is that people do not do business with machines. People do business with people. And Huawei's culture of perseverance, of resilience, and of resourcefulness, I think shows through decades that it is able to not only meet customers' needs, but adapt to very, very challenging circumstances. In many ways, Huawei is like the people of China, in that survival is in their DNA. I also think back to what David Ogilvy said. So while Huawei is a tech company, but people are what matter most. And what David Ogilvy said about the advertising industry, about his company, was that every day, the most valuable assets of the company walk out the door. And I think Huawei is the same. What gives it a shot at survival is its people, its employees, their resilience, their determination, their survival DNA.
Not just as the economical trade, as we have just heard, but as that conflict of ideology, diplomacy, and cultures where its impacts are long-lasting. On the other hand, you have Huawei, which continues to build on their resilience, like Andy just said, Mr. Mock, patience and defense mechanisms. Huawei has a visionary planning mindset that has been winning partners and customers for over 3 decades. And this takes me to a topic I love to talk about, which is trust, gentlemen. Another crucial issue that Huawei and many other tech companies face is the lack of public trust in new technology, which is normally caused by misinformation and conspiracy circulated especially on social media, and we are all experts on this. So gentlemen, how can Huawei overcome technophobia and mistrust amongst the public in order to gain faith and assurance on Huawei's technology? I would like to start with the affirmative side. Go ahead.
there is a Cold War brewing. It's happening. It's going to continue to happen. And we saw what devastation it had to progress to have an Iron Curtain and an East Bloc and West Bloc in the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. And it's lining up to do that again. The leaders want that sort of thing. They want the fear. They want to stay in power. And the only way they do that is by promoting more fear. What William Barr has admitted is that they are conspiring with the tech companies here in the United States so that we can have the 5G market. It's misguided in my mind, but we're here to talk about what the fear is and how to fix it. We've got to stop being afraid of our governments. We've got to stop being afraid of what they're doing. And we've got to petition them to let us get on with business and do whatever we can. If we do that, we can get past the fear, and it won't be like the new technology can't work because it's not the old technology. That's without question right now. The good thing about the crisis we're in is the potential that we can start breaking through some of the fears that we've had before. Here we're calling the virus the Chinese virus, and people were very mad, not wanting to buy anything, not wanting to eat Chinese food, which is American recipes prepared locally, but just crazy things like that. And it's turned around. We're now buying Chinese masks and saying, we need that, we need your help. And I think it's possible that the technology can offer us a cure, but let's not count on the fear and the human nature and governments to fix this.
Okay, so Mr. Whitlock is adamant that the Cold War is here. What does the opposite side think now?
I want to ask this question. Why Huawei has to clean up the mess of the mistrust? Because Huawei is Chinese? It's so absurd. I have the same feeling as being a Turkish. You just named me as a 13th influential economist of the world. When you say something like that, most of the people who just graduated from the American, schools, they just make a grin like that. I understand that because I'm out of the system. I'm new in the system, so they don't like me as being a Turk. So why Huawei has to be banned because Huawei is Chinese? So this is so absurd because I have so much experience in this region, in this MENA region and the East Europe with the American companies for 20 years. We invested $zillions of money for the automation. Still, we don't have the result. We don't have the accurate automation systems in Turkey and in the region. So I remember Secretary Ross came, the Secretary of the Commerce of the United States, came to Turkey, make a long visit of 1 week. When he was turning back in the airport, he said he turned back to for the newspaper guys, he said, Turkish companies' automation systems actually is not accurate. It was such a blast on the Turkish media because we invested heavily with the American firms on the automation system of the Turkish industry, and an American says that, a very prominent American says that it's not working at all. So when Huawei came to this market, actually the mistrust was already there. So what Huawei did? Huawei did joint project with the Turkish people, and this, with a dramatic decrease in the prices happened. We were so happy to have accurate recipes for automation. So that is the threat. So when Huawei came into the market, all the Western technology firms were afraid. So the gentleman agreements no longer exist because we have competition rules and we started to have good laws in the emerging economies. So of course they are complaining. For me, when we saw another alternative, flesh and blood, like Huawei, all the gentleman agreements actually didn't survive any longer. As a conclusion, if you say that if this United States and temporary allies on this matter will stop this madness, Huawei will continue to invest in technology in this region, and we will have more prosperous future. So this is my expectation. So I don't understand why Huawei has to erase this mess. Why? Because Huawei is Chinese. This is absurd to me, sorry.
Strong arguments from both Mr. Whitlock and Mr. Alkin to kick off this topic. So let's take it now to the opposite side again to see what their thoughts are.
Thank you, Elise. So I want to respond to Professor Emre here, and he's asking the question, why does Huawei need to clean up this mess? Now, I think what we're looking at is the reason why is because they're in they're in social media, and every company, they're a media company. I mean, they're a technology company, and we just simply look at this fact: social media accelerates the spread of misinformation. Now, I recently watched a movie called The Social Dilemma, and it was fascinating. It shared a recent survey from MIT that revealed that fake news travels 6 times faster than real news. So, if you're a technology company, you're obviously on social media, you're going to be in this industry, you're going to be exposed to this, and misinformation is just one of the many things that you're going to have to circumnavigate moving forward. Unfortunately, what's really sad right now is that, this misinformation online is really spreading to a lot of conspiracy theories. For example, earlier this year, we saw a lot of people linking 5G technology, to the spread of the coronavirus. So we saw in the UK in April, for example, there were 80 5G towers that were actually destroyed by arson. And what's worse than that, actually, employees that were working at these 5G towers in the UK, they were both physically or verbally assaulted. Just because people are believing this stuff online, and there's just so much misinformation that is being spread online. Now, I do want to say that it is not an exclusive Chinese thing. I think this is all technology. All companies are going to have to battle this. For instance, Facebook was just recently accused of using Instagram to spy on users through the cell phone cameras. But I want to follow up on the last point that Warren said, and this is that mistrust is deeply rooted in human DNA. I believe that, we can see in America everywhere, everybody is going to be a little bit less trustful of technology moving forward. And this is going to be a very large hurdle for Huawei and all tech companies to overcome.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So far, we have a Cold War, we have Turkey borders, and we have the social dilemma for Mr. Johnson. So now to finish this round, let's go to Mr. Mock.
Well, I think this question of fake news is a very real one, and Huawei needs to respond to this. Because if you can't win the trust, not just of your customers, which we touched on, but all the other stakeholders, and unfortunately or fortunately, public opinion matters a lot. But I think we need to point out here, though, that this is not just a Huawei problem. As Cyrus touched on, Facebook, Twitter, a lot of other companies face this problem. And I have to say, China was ahead of the curve here. So very, very early on, China recognized that the internet is not just for sharing information. It also can be a source of misinformation and therefore needs to be managed. So I think Huawei is also taking steps in this area to combat misinformation. But it is also, I think, taking a leadership role in providing social goods, if we may call them that, to help people see the value of technology and the value that companies like Huawei provide. So look at the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, for example. Huawei has contributed expertise and technology to develop applications for diagnosis and for treatment of COVID-19, including providing infrastructure, cloud, for data analysis to find better cures for COVID-19. It's also taken initiatives like climate change, the rainforest, these things around the world, the bottom of the pyramid. And I think by taking all of these steps, not only by fighting misinformation, but also positively contributing to a better environment, that Huawei is building trust and contributing to this problem that all technology companies face, and even all of society faces, with misinformation and mistrust.
I have met a couple of the founders of 2 of the projects that Huawei is connected to. Topher White, founder and CEO of the Rainforest Connection, and Marta Ortin, co-founder and engineer at Dive Medical, part of the Track AI projects. These are palpable projects. You can touch them, you can feel them, and they're all using artificial intelligence to help with deforestation, something Mr. Mock was just talking about, and they're detecting eyesight impairment. Now, another long-term problem that Huawei faces is not just the trust or mistrust, it's the mistrust in the China brands. So let's get on this topic. And this time I want to talk geopolitics, gentlemen. As being a Chinese technology company, do you think Huawei will be able to shake away the groundless coalition with Chinese government and be accepted and accredited as an independent technology company? Let's start with the affirmative side.
Absolutely. Thank you, Elise. So I want to start off by just talking about the current geopolitical agenda of the United States toward China. And that is simply the United States is trying to undermine China in any way possible. And we saw this earlier this year with the sanctions starting against Huawei. And then it expanded to banning TikTok. Next on the chopping block was Tencent. Now Donald Trump has said, we're going to target Alibaba. Bloomberg just released another article last week stating that, Chinese mobile payment services in the United States, WeChat Pay, Alipay, these are now going to be targeted. Even Chinese international students are being labeled as spies. Secretary of State Michael Pompeo addressing America saying, Chinese parents at your parent-teacher meetings, they're spies of the Chinese government. This is the current, agenda that the United States is pushing. Seemingly everything is going to be, associated with the Communist Party of China. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to start banning chopsticks in America, the way that they're going down, this road. So I believe that this is a very difficult thing for Huawei to overcome, because at the end of the day, people are not going to understand the fact, for example, that 98% of the shares of the Huawei company are actually employee owned. It is very much a private company. It is separate from the Communist Party of China, but people are always going to be associating, Huawei, it's Chinese, it's the Communist Party, and this is what the United States government is just so clear on. They are trying to push moving forward. And of course, the United States citizens are going to listen to their government. I think also, in addition to that, you're going to see the United States government is going to start giving, more pressure to other Western countries around the world to, also join in these efforts. We saw that with the UK. Donald Trump was giving a lot of pressure to the UK to also ban, Huawei there. When the UK agreed to, the White House is very happy. They thought that as a huge victory moving forward. So this is, gentlemen, this is what I want to start this topic on, is how is Huawei going to overcome this current geopolitical agenda from the United States?
You've made a very strong start, Mr. Johnson. And it is true, with the US having such a strong influence onto the rest of the markets, can Huawei have a true chance? So let's take it now to the opposite side.
I have no evidence whatsoever about Huawei, who is linked to military, intelligence, services, or government or stuff. It's a capitalist company who tries its best to improve technology for everybody. That's it. So that's my analysis. So I really don't have the slightest idea that Huawei work for government, for any other state institution. My suggestion for Huawei, like Emre said, the best way to overcome these disturbances is to continue to improve technology and share with everyone on the planet. Increase the partnership with the academic world, like saying that building the future together. Be active in the music. I always underline that in Huawei headquarters. Be in the music, because the music business is heavily dominated by United States, Australia, and United Kingdom. Don't compete them. Help them, give them new technologies, improve the music, collaborate with the music platforms without competing them. So be in the culture, in sports, everywhere that the humanity exists. Where there is life, there is hope. I always hope for Huawei, because Huawei is alive. Alive, maybe stronger than ever. When you see the financial results, it's all good. But I think, long story short, the resilience with passions, improvement, novelties, soft power, and transparency. Transparency is the key. I'm so happy that Huawei is releasing annual reports. Annual report is very important. That's how we understand what the company is doing actually, organizationally and economically. So a Turkish proverb, the patience is sour, but its fruit is always sweet. So the patience is the key, and the resilience.
Thank you, Mr. Alkin. One question comes to mind after hearing you both so far. Is it innocent until proven guilty, or is it guilty until proven innocent? Let's take it now to the affirmative side.
Well, in direct answer to your question, I think that's just ridiculous. I also think the whole question of trying to separate Huawei from the Chinese government is a lost cause. It isn't going to happen. It's a moot question at this point. The world is the way that it is. It's going to continue to be the way that it is. People, human beings, have natural fears of things. My fear of things from Asia started when I was a small child and told, don't, the reason why your toy broke is because it's stamped made in Japan on the back. And in the 50s, products from Japan were crap that arrived in the United States. That's not true today. That doesn't mean that there isn't an animosity that comes from a culture telling you that there is something wrong with the other people. Very natural. It's the reason why racism exists. And, take a look at what's going on in the United States right now. We're still battling racism. It's been 400 years, over 150 years since we abolished slavery, and we're still working about it. I don't care if Huawei is controlled by the Chinese or just located in China or run by people who are Chinese. I'm all for them. I think it's great. I don't have this view. I've overcome all those easy, simple fears that I had as a child. I'm able to look at things globally. But globally, what we have to do is understand the landscape the way that it is, and then make adjustments in our policies and our reactions to it so that we can progress together. And if the wrong-headed people in government are trying to block things, they make a giant mess. But we still can overcome because the technology, all of the emerging technologies, especially the things like 5G, are going to continue to prosper.
Thank you, Mr. Whitlock. Then let's close this round with the opposite side.
Well, to answer your question, Elise, I think that it is a challenging, if not bleak, time to be in favor of cross-border trade and investment and globalization. So it is guilty until proven innocent. But I think in this, the US is on the wrong side of history in attacking Huawei and portraying it as an agent or a pawn of the Chinese government. So in the short term, politics trumps economics. But in the long term, economics always wins. And when we look at Huawei's contributions, not just to its customers, but to the entire global supply chain, suppliers of semiconductors, of design software, everything we can think of in a very complex global supply chain, Huawei really has delivered so much value. So I think in the long run, Huawei will overcome these attacks by the US government. In Chinese, there's a phrase, 坚持是胜利, meaning that perseverance is victory. And as long as Huawei can persist, and I think by relying on the resilience, the creativity, and the determination of its employees, the trust of its customers, that if it can tough out this short, very, very difficult period, and not to underestimate the challenge and the threat that Huawei is facing, but if it can get past this difficult time, the value it's contributing to the world will be recognized as long as it can continue to persevere.
Thank you, Mr. Mock. As we can see, it's not just Huawei, it is pretty much any Chinese tech brand that the West has a problem with. And Mr. Whitlock was very strong and passionate about this fact. We're living in an era where people do not really accept the facts anymore, and are driven more based on emotion and whatever the media tells them. I have personal experiences on social media, for example, where I never get as much negativity when speaking about Western brands than when I do the Chinese. And that is an automatic bias because people do not even bother to read the facts. So can this kill Huawei long term? It has been a very informative debate, and before we go, I would like if you can all share one key takeaway from your insights today, and please be as blunt as you want. Let's begin with Mr. Mock.
So I think that, again, unfortunately, in the short term, politics trumps economics, but in the long term, economics will win. And Huawei's spirit of innovation, as well as its survival DNA, will see it come out successful in the long run.
Mr. Whitlock?
I think Huawei is a tremendous company, growing fast, doing good things. And the fact that there's this little trade war thing going on, yeah, like Andy says, it's a mess, and we're going to have to get past it. We're not going to get past it by trying to fix global politics, and we're just going to have to do our jobs better, and people will realize that people want great technology. You give somebody a better smartphone that, will feed the dog better, and they're going to buy whatever device it comes on. We're not that prejudiced.
Mr. Alkin?
Well, I recently read this book, Frederick Forsyth, the famous writer, as you know, and the name of the book is Fox. He's talking about the cyber attacks and the hackers from where? United States, United Kingdom, Russia, Iran, North Korea, but surprisingly, no Chinese in this book. He's a clever guy. It's a good sign that Huawei will survive. Maybe the intellectual world knows about the truth.
And last but not least, Mr. Johnson, please.
Yeah, I'd like to conclude just by saying, looking at the year 2020, I think none of us could have imagined 2020 shaping up and, the events of this year unfolding the way they have. I myself, an American, I'm looking very much forward, along with the rest of the world, to November 3rd, the presidential election. Will Donald Trump win again? Has these anti-China rhetoric that he's been spewing, has that just been a campaign tactic to get another 4 years in the White House? Would a Biden victory actually bring better relationship between, the United States and China? I think what we're really looking at, and the key takeaway here, is that, technology is always changing. Warren made a good point about that earlier. Change is constant, and technology really is a double-edged sword. At one point, it has the power to connect all of us. We can do great debates like this in all parts of the world, but on the other side, it is very divisive at times, and it does create a lot of division. This change is going to be constant, and I think only the strongest and most innovative companies are going to rise to the top. Now, I believe that the United States is going to continue these attacks against Huawei, but Huawei has proved that it is a very resilient company. So only time is going to tell if they can turn this crisis into a potential opportunity.
Thank you all. As you can see, we have a 50-50 here. The pressure of the US, the Western world, and the bias of the media are very strong and can take its toll on Huawei because people still believe more on this than actual facts. On the other hand, people believe in social goods brought by emerging technologies like 5G and artificial intelligence. The one thing I've learned, Huawei will not stop its passion for technology and tech for good. It reminds me a little bit of a Chinese philosophy and the mythical story of the phoenix, an ancient legendary symbol which lives for several hundred years before it dies and then bursts into flames, and then is reborn from the ashes to start a new, long life as a glowing, shimmering bird. The phoenix is a symbolic story of Huawei's spirit and corporate culture of longevity, resurrection, and transformation.